Today was the day that would determine who became the governor of this planet. Flight Captain Gallius, the commanding officer for Flight Squadron 315, was feeling good on the big day of the grand assault as his personalized fighter aircraft cut through the purple sky towards the front line with his trusted squad mates in tight formation. They had the governor's forces where they wanted them and a decisive battle was commencing. Going from past experience of dozens of engagements, there was no way they were going to lose this fight. Gallius was not a man who was particularly interested in the politics of it all. The governor and her half-brother had a quarrel, so war broke out. As far as he was concerned, he was just glad that he was on the winning team. After this was done and settled, Lord Cathan would replace his half-sister as the new planetary governor. Things will carry on as normal after the mess was cleaned up. The God Emperor will remain as unmoving as the Externus sun, and by his good grace maybe he will earn a few medals and get a good raise. Things were looking up. That said, the forward squadrons ahead of him had not sent their updates yet, and the chatter from headquarters went still some time ago. Gallius was about to double-check if he had muted his Vox unit by accident when a message started playing. From it came a calm and soothing female voice that he had never heard before. Attention to forces under Cathan von Cleus. This is a statement made on behalf of Catalina von Cleus, the rightful governor of Nusquam, backed by a joint declaration from the Inquisition, Adeptus Auroritas, and Adeptus Mechonicus. Your actions of taking up arms against Governor Catalina is deemed illegal and misguided. By the Emperor's grace, we will confer to you a chance to surrender. Choose wisely when the opportunity to return to the right path presents itself. The Emperor protects. Gallius was livid. Just what in the throne's name is headquarters doing? Losing out on electronics warfare now of all times? Gallius tried a few settings on his Vox unit, but all the frequencies were occupied with the same repeating message. Just when he was about to turn to another frequency, the message changed. Attention to Flight Squadrons 315 to 320, your chance is here. We have total control over your radar net, Vox network and ground anti-air systems. Eject from your aircraft now for salvation. Gallius gulped and fell to cold premonition as the Vox singled out his flight group, making it sound less like an empty threat by the second. He quickly checked on his auspex and was stunned to find its readings had gone haywire and he could not even contact his squad mates. At the same time, his onboard warning system started to chime, signaling his craft was being targeted by anti-air systems despite the fact they were still flying in airspace under their control. This is not a drill. Please don't die from this. You have 10 seconds to comply starting now. 10, 9. Gallius watched in disbelief as his day abruptly turned 180. He looked outside from his cockpit and witnessed the rest of his squadron seem to be in the same predicament. His first wingman was even frantically hand-signaling to him. 6, 5, 4, the gentle female voice continued her relentless countdown. The incongruity between how it sounded and its lethal implication paralyzed Gallius. Then he saw it, on the edge of his vision. Far off in front were the forward squadrons, and they were falling from the sky in droves. Trails of smoke signaling the deaths of aircraft and explosions filled the sky while the warning chime inside his cockpit was getting deafening. 2, 1. Gallius screamed and hit the eject button. A split second later he was in the air with his seat. He looked down just in time to witness his prized personalized fighter aircraft being blown to bits by anti-air fire originating from behind the lines. Meanwhile, higher in the sky elsewhere, Zafira Baio was praying to the Emperor while waiting for the green light to deep strike into battle. She and her 300 Seraphim sisters had gone on a very risky mission, riding on blind faith, boarding unfamiliar air transports flying over enemy airspace with no fighter escorts. As prepared as she ever would be for the impending operation, Zafira went into a warrior's meditative trance, making peace with herself while awaiting whatever fate awaited her. Just hours earlier, Canonis Diadina had returned from her abrupt departure with a renewed sense of zeal none of them had ever remembered witnessing. A quick meeting involving all the highest-ranking members of the Order was then held. Zafira and the others had come out of the meeting infected by that zeal as well, but it still sounded too good to be true. She had still harbored a sliver of lingering doubts until witnessing that light herself. Just the fact that their holy daughter was with them had burned away any question if their actions were ordained by his will. Strangely, despite currently being in the most dangerous part of the mission, Zafira felt totally at peace. Having strong faith is one thing, Witnessing the divinity of one's God manifested, bringing absolution to that faith was a totally different level of experience. His divinity is real. She could die now and be happy, knowing even if this mission failed with her death, somehow it will still be part of his divine plan. Ding. A system chime broke her reverie. She recognized the sound and put on her helmet for the tactical relay update. What she saw shocked her. A complete tactical map of their target base with astonishing detail was displayed in her helmet's data feed together with an ETA countdown of 2 minutes. She did a quick mental calculation and came to the realization they had already gone over the rebel air fighters' defense net, meeting no resistance the whole way. SYRINE's words came back at her. Have no worries, for we have methods to deal with them. Hardly able to contain her excitement, Zafia went over the information quickly and could not help but smile after looking at the number of troops currently stationed in the base. The rebels had no chance. I watched as a literal god of war as the rebel flight squadrons 315 to 320 blipped out of existence, further cementing total air superiority for our side as the grand trap was about to be sprung. I was not sure if the pilots ejected from their aircraft in time, but a final warning was delivered before the anti-air weapons hit their aircraft. Everything was calculated down to the second, giving them no chance to react outside the script. The next targeted message was prepared as I kept up with thought acceleration to control multiple complex processes, compiled my warnings in digital sound data and delivered it to the next batch of rebel strike wings while targeting them with anti-air assets from the rebels' own backyard. At the same time I was fabricating false data and Auspex readouts for their headquarters to keep their main battle force on the ground rolling deeper into our trap. There would be a lot of confused people on the rebels' side as their anti-air placements were seemingly firing at random, but since most real long-range targeting was done by cogitators, it was a simple hijacking operation for me once a connection was established from the back end. My eyes were closed, but a virtual map of the battlefield created from live data had replaced my vision. Hundreds of thousands of unit indicators populated the map, each signaling their real on-field counterparts. Thousands upon thousands of messages of cogitators establishing connections and complying flashed by in my view, and I soon learned to tune it out. With the secret aid of Mechanicus personnel from the inside, we now had total control over the long-range Vox network of the rebels, and millions of Vox messages were intercepted, decrypted and analyzed by cryptophers, advanced cogitators in orbit for tactical information, while I acted as a conduit between the whole process. Exabytes worth of data must have gone through me every second to direct the battlefield, and for the first time, I felt a bit strained. Everything is going as planned, such a numerical improbability. Cryptora's comment popped into my head. He was on his own command throne close by elsewhere to oversee the deployment of Mechanicus forces. The Dominus words prompted me to double-check on the status of Zafia and her sisters. It seemed like they had successfully reached their destination and were in the process of deploying from the sky. I heaved a sigh of relief but immediately got back to my feet, checking on everything since the biggest hidden threat of all, the renegade Space Marines, had yet to show themselves. The looming threat of an ultra-elite force of unknown numbers and modus operandi was the biggest unaccounted risk factor of the whole operation. Despite all the war meetings we had been through, no ideal solution ever surfaced on how to deal with them, so we had left it at that, reserving some forces on our part and hoping for the best. So are we good and proceeding with our plan? I asked via the information link established via the podium. Yes, are you holding up fine on your end? It felt a bit strained, but it is manageable for now. Good, the back-end elements are in place, we shall proceed as planned. Omnissiah be praised. Your actions of taking up arms against Governor Cartolina is deemed illegal and misguided. By the Emperor's grace, we will confer to you a chance to surrender. Rearguard General Boren raised his eyebrows at the message coming from the central Vox unit of his command bunker. Charged with all the artillery battalions under Lord Cathan, Boren had multiple units of dedicated artillery groups under his direct command tucked safely behind the main offensive line, guarded by layers of protection. He was ready for a day of action on delivering death to the front line via extreme range and had been waiting for targeting orders from the main battle group, but it was strangely quiet from the front. Then the Vox network seemed to be hijacked by the governor's forces and had been repeating the same weird message ever since. Bah, humbug. Boren scoffed, as if talking rubbish alone will change the course of the war. We have thousands of guns here waiting to sing to your demise, soon-to-be ex-governor. Maybe she knew her only way to get out of this is to talk us into surrendering, one of his aides offered. Borin laughed slightly at his aide's awkward effort to shine his shoes but had to admit he was never much of a fan of Catalina due to personal taste. The general mused at his own thoughts but was soon getting back into working mode and demanded, "Quit idling around, who can tell me when will the Vox network be fixed?" Suddenly there was a commotion and a lot of sounds were heard from the outside. Borin was alarmed as he searched his memories and it reminded him of the retrobusters of jump packs, but none of the units under the banner of Cathan utilized such advanced equipment. Before he could verify what was happening, the sound of bolt weapons firing was heard all around. "We are under attack." Someone in the command bunker snapped to his senses and called out, "The Vox! The Vox is not working." Another shouted, "Impossible." Borin thought to himself, the governor's forces had deep-struck jump pack units directly under his position and cut off his communications. But the Auspex radar net had picked up nothing, unless all our Auspex and Vox network had been compromised. He shouted his belated realization. Not only that, the fact that elite enemy units had directly landed on his command bunker meant a catastrophic level of classified information might have been leaked out. The short-range independent Vox units should still work. Get the emergency runner truck going and warn Lord Cathan that we are compromised. Someone did that and a Taurox truck parked at the edge of his base immediately sped off towards their headquarters. Borin had been a general for decades. He prepared such a contingency for any just-in-case scenarios. Little did he know squads of Mechonicus Sicarian infiltrators had infiltrated near their base. The truck was ambushed and never reached the headquarters, while their short-range Vox was hopelessly out of range to warn their colleagues. Back in the base, Borin watched in disbelief as the reinforced plasteel door of his command bunker began to glow red-hot and was cut down by the distinct superheated melter beams. The administrative staff inside Borin's command bunker was still frantically voxing for help when the armored angelic forms of multiple sororitas seraphims stepped through the fallen plasteel door and came straight for them with bolt pistols and inferno pistols raised. One of Borin's bodyguards fired a few last pistol shots at the seraphims but the last bolts bounced off harmlessly from their power armor and his brain was blown off for his troubles. Borin had drawn his last pistol but he knew it was a lost cause. Against elite sisters wearing power armor in close quarters, their odds of winning were close to zero, so he waited for death. To his surprise, the sisters pointed their weapons at him but took no further action. For a while the only sound that could be heard inside the bunker was the Vox unit repeating the same messages. Staring down death, General Borin watched in astonishment as the seraphims in front of him parted, giving way as a seraphim superior stepped forward. Borin could easily tell she was a sister superior as the leading seraphim was brandishing a power sword and wore a more decorated helmet than the rest. The sister superior looked at him and removed her helmet, revealing a stern-looking dark-skinned woman. She eyed Borin for a while before speaking. "Greetings, General. I am Zafira Baio, Seraphim Excelsior of the Order of the Shining Beacon." She then turned her head at the Vox unit which was still continuing its message. "Choose wisely when the opportunity to return to the right path presents itself. The Emperor protects." Zafira seemed to smile upon hearing that and eyed General Borin again before saying, "Our holy daughter has spoken. This act of mercy will only be granted to you once. So what is your choice? Choose wisely, General." Borin gritted his teeth, made his resolution to die standing and replied, "You won this fight. Do what you want but I will not betray my people." Again he expected death, but Zafira simply looked at him with an expression that suggested pity, like a parent looking down at a wayward child throwing a tantrum. "General, I believe you do not understand the gravity of the situation. Fortunately, there is a certain someone who could enlighten you. Sisters, secure the others in a separate room." It was at this time a skull probe with a sophisticated-looking device attached underneath it floated into the command bunker. It flew around doing some sort of scanning for a while, then it stopped flying and settled down on a desk in front of the general. As it did so, all the Vox devices inside the bunker finally stopped broadcasting. In the eerie silence, the device under the skull probe came to life and out pops a hologram featuring a young lady with an air of saintly regality. As one, all the seraphims present bowed deeply towards the figure. "Excellent work, sisters," said the figure in the hologram, her voice a match with the one that was on ceaseless repetition earlier. "Now, I would like to have a few words with the general." Moments later, a hapless Boran was forced into a conversation with the hologram, a diligent Zephyr looking from the side. "General Boran Yalston, I am sorry we have to meet as opposition on this battlefield. My name is SYRINE, daughter of the Emperor. I am supporting Governor Katalina von Kleus in this unfortunate conflict." Receiving no response, SYRINE paused for a moment before asking a shocking question. "Have you forsaken the Imperium, General?" Boran felt his breath was taken away by the deeply offending question, but his inert stubbornness held up his composure. "What? Never." "So you are still a loyal servant of the Emperor?" "Always have been, always will be." "Then why did you raise your weapons against the sororitas?" "That. They meddled into our politics and came into our crosshairs on their own volition. It was unfortunate, but it had to be done. We would never actively seek to oppose them." SYRINE did not respond and her expression remained inscrutable. "I don't care what you want. Kill me now, there is nothing you can do to change my allegiance," Boran declared with pride. SYRINE smiled softly on that reply. "So unfortunate. Your courage is commendable, but your actions are misguided." "What are you trying to tell me?" "General, do you not realize your actions might have aided the great enemy and their heresy against my father?"
"Wait, who is your father? Who are you again?"
Boran was confused. While he did hear SYRINE's self-introduction clearly, it was common knowledge all members of the sororitas identify themselves as daughters of the Emperor. Why she would bring that up was beyond him, unless... SYRINE closed her eyes. Suddenly all the communication devices in the command bunker came back to life. Boran witnessed in utter bewilderment as he heard his own voice berating orders into the network, ordering multiple smoke screen barrages deployment in quick successions, with his field units quickly giving back acknowledgements.
"You...
How?" Boran cried out in despair as his authority over multiple artillery battalions was hijacked live in front of him. Then, to his utter horror, he realized SYRINE could have just ordered explosive shells instead of smoke screens. The shock was too much for him. His knee gave way as he dropped to the ground kneeling. Just as Boran felt it was all over, SYRINE started speaking again. "My offer of mercy to you still stands, and I intend to extend the same offer to as many of your colleagues as possible." Not believing what he had just heard, Boran looked up at SYRINE again and found the latter looking back at him, a golden halo around her head. "That halo?" Boran gasped. "How about it? I promise you no order will come forth to drop explosive shells on your allies. General, I would much prefer you to continue serving my father than otherwise." Daughter of the Emperor, I should continue to serve her father. Going against her father is heresy. Boran finally put two and two together. His mind went totally blank upon the revelation. Target acquired. After verifying their target was indeed Katalina von Kleus, Neandra activated the recording function on her binoculars and gave the signal to attack. A long distance away, elite kill team members of Mechonicus Scutari Rangers fired their transuranic arquebuses from concealed positions. Neandra watched as the supersonic depleted transuranium shells that could fully penetrate a battle tank went through layers of reinforced concrete and hit their mark, only to be repelled by an energy field that materialized on impact. Even through the walls, the advanced sensors in her multispectrum binoculars had confirmed their quarry was still alive. This rare joint operation between the Inquisition and Mechonicus had started off promising enough, but a quick and easy resolution still eluded them. If it had gone as planned, Neandra just had to be a witness to Kathan's demise, but unfortunately, the man was resourceful enough to survive their sniper volley. "So it is back to the standard affair after all," the assassin thought as she sprang into action and ran forward after sending out another signal notifying the strike force to go for the assault. Way ahead of her, squads of Mechonicus Sicarian infiltrators who had snuck forward earlier broke their concealment and started a direct attack. Artillery fire inbound onto target base, variant Manticore Storm Eagle rockets, ETA 5 minutes. The Scutari Alpha Ranger who was in charge of the strike force dropped his Vox warning with a tone so flat most people would think the speaker was completely devoid of biological parts, but what Neandra took notice of was their choice of weapon deployed. Manticore rockets again? She mused to herself, silently noting how even the cult Mechonicus, an order that was supposed to champion cold logic, could still be petty when a chance of payback presented itself. Inside the perimeter of the headquarters, hell broke loose as automated sentry guns came online, but instead of shooting the invaders, turned their guns on the occupants of the base instead. Heavy bolter rounds started firing indiscriminately into troops and administrative staff with gruesome effects. Amid the ensuing havoc, any troops that managed to rally soon clashed with the SYRINE infiltrators, and the results were spectacularly one-sided. The tall and slender forms of post-human infiltrators barely broke their stride as they cut through the human ranks with flechette blasters spitting death, while taser goads split heads and bones in showers of blood and gore. The cybernetic killers sped relentlessly forward, all the while broadcasting mind-bending neurostatic bombardment of anguished static screams on disruptive wavelengths from their dome-shaped heads to cause further disarray as they decimated the rebel ranks. The rebels who were caught between a surprise attack and subverted security measures stood no chance. Dozens of people died in the first 20 seconds before a general alarm was even sounded. Neandra was getting close to the quarry, her ponytail and chameleon camo cloak fluttering in the air as she dashed forward with inhuman speed and leaping over heaps of dead bodies. Right in front of her, a short distance ahead, the squad of infiltrators charged with securing Cathan went inside the main building for the finishing blow. Archdominus Cryptora Cycle had deemed the assassination attempt on SYRINE an act of high terrorism and pinning the responsibilities on Cathan. This operation served both as payback and a decapitating strike on the leadership of the rebel army. An elite strike force was assigned to the task, and Neandra was attached to it as both liaison and overseer of the operation for the Inquisition, as it was in Inquisitor Thaberus' interest to confirm Cathan's elimination. This was the first time Neandra was working with members of Skitarii, the cybernetic military forces of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Looking at the speedy progress, even as a lethal killer herself, she was impressed by their cold efficiency. Just as she was anticipating the mission coming to a closure, the sounds of close-quarter melee erupted from the target building. Cathan still has forces that are able to withstand the Skitarii? The moment that idea crossed Neandra's mind, there was a sudden sense of foreboding warning her that she had turned from a hunter to the hunted. Trusting her instincts, Neandra quickly moved to one side without hesitation and barely dodged an unseen attack that seemingly materialized from the thin air, feeling the air sizzling uncomfortably close to her face. Despite the lack of a visible enemy, the assassin somehow managed to parry 2 more heavy blows in a heartbeat before jumping back and dispersing a cloud of powder in front of her. Being the chief distributor for Thaberus' inquisitorial judgment for decades had taught Neandra to prepare for all eventualities, so a seemingly invisible enemy hardly counted as the strangest thing she had seen in her unconventional career. When her powder made contact with the enemy, a curious reaction occurred and undid whatever was holding up the stealth, revealing her opponent to be a space marine in full warplate. Pushing down her own shock at the revelation, she had but half a second to get a proper look at the marine without any time to dwell on how a 7-feet-tall space marine could turn invisible. He appeared to be wearing a dark grey suit of power armor of mismatched components devoid of any markings, but was primarily made up from Mark V armor. His choice of melee weapon was a single lightning claw gauntlet. The marine's Corvus pattern helmet with cold blue lens stared like an avian beast as he pointed a bolt pistol at her, just in time for the assassin with transhuman reflexes to dodge his shot by the smallest distance. Neandra lunged forward with her power sword, forcing the marine to take a step back. Taking her chance, the assassin quickly drew and fired her grav pistol at the marine near point-blank range with her free hand. A weapon that was really effective against large mass targets. Grav weapons were rare but not out of reach from the Inquisition. Knowing the possibility of encountering renegade marines again, she had prepared the pistol just in case any of them showed up. Too close to dodge the attack, the marine instead blocked the shot with his bolt pistol, sacrificing his sidearm and retaliating with a brutal and swift upwards kick. His attack connected, but to his surprise, the assassin took the blow, the close space severely limiting its force to be lethal. She caught the kick with her arms and used it to launch herself backwards to put some distance between them. The marine watched as the Neandra nimbly flew back, drawing her camo cloak in and activating it to melt her image with the surroundings an instant later. He was about to give chase before realizing the perimeter heavy bolter sentries had started training their guns on him, so he retreated. Moments later, Neandra was applying first aid to her bruised forearm that had absorbed the kick while watching from a safe distance as the rebel headquarters compound was leveled by relentless bombardment. With its void shield generator shut down, the base was helpless against conventional attacks. Earlier she had witnessed a dark grey Astartes Thunderhawk gunship flying extremely low to the ground, fleeing from the site like a wounded beast. She had little doubt Cathan had escaped on it. The Skitarii Alpha Ranger, sounding as lifeless as before, had reported back to her about the Sicarian infiltrators squad tasked with apprehending the rebel lord had clashed with an unknown Astartes unit and was presumed lost before the bombardment hit. She raised her bandaged forearm. It stung a little even with all the pain suppressants in her system. The blunt force trauma from a Space Marine's kick with his power-armored boot could have caused some deep muscle and bone damage. She made a mental note to get prepared for some of Veritas' good old berating while sending out a coded message to Thaberus informing him of the unfortunate mission result and her strange encounter with a Space Marine who can turn invisible. Mission update: Operation Decapitation had concluded. Moments ago I had flipped the identification friend or foe protocol on the sentry gun network and turned off the rebel headquarters void shield generators. It would appear the carnage was over. Fighting through my complicated feelings of getting people slaughtered, I asked the important question. Did we get Cathan? Negative, Cathan von Cleus had escaped due to renegade Astartes intervention. Cryptopher sent via mind link. So they finally showed up in the theater of war. How many Marines? Reports suggest only a very small number of them took part in the action. A single Astartes Thunderhawk gunship left the area with Cathan on board. There is this more concerning report about at least one of the Marines our strike force encountered seemed to possess an unconventional ability, being completely imperceivable even by a transhuman until he attacks. You mean they could be totally undetectable? Is this some sort of chaos sorcery? I was shocked. That might explain why I could not detect any of them in the war zone. How that was achieved is yet unknown, but so far there has been only one reported case. Seeing they had never used it to get rid of the governor. This ability is either a very rare skill or could be constrained by severe deployment limitations. Are we at risk of such attacks? Although the odds of them infiltrating here for a surgical strike of their own is very low. Just in case, I have ordered Skitarii Alpha Kira to double the guards stationed around you and me. So, after all that effort, we could have ended the war then and there. Unfortunate, but the decapitation of his military leadership capacity was successful. He has suffered a catastrophic loss of key personnel and his army headquarters was completely destroyed. I am relaying to you all the acquired data as we speak. Thank you, Crypto. I sent back while receiving the huge data cache, at the same time ignoring the waterfall-like constant messages of cogitators establishing connections and complying. I took a peek and noticed Neandra had taken part in that mission and was relieved to see no report of her injury or demise. I quickly took out the key information and compiled the data into a presentable format to be used later and sent an advance copy to the rear end of the rebel forces where the Sororitas Seraphims were holding up rearguard General Borin. A lot of effort had been put into the operation to take over the rebels' backline. I had even enticed the general to talk so a more comprehensive analysis of his speech pattern could be done. It was then demonstrated to let him know we do not exactly need his cooperation to screw up their whole army. In truth, I did prefer him to surrender to us peacefully. Borin Yalston, known as Ironback Borin by his subordinates, has a reputation for being a straight-talking, stern but fair man with effective leadership skills. Just the type of man the planet needed for defense. Borin had since been asked about the renegade Marines but he apparently knew nothing about it. His shocked reaction upon being informed and shown evidence of the existence of Space Marines seemed genuine enough, so that meant only the people at the very top of the rebel faction were involved with the Marines. The plot thickens. Successfully getting Borin and the forces under his command out of the fight meant we had for the moment put multiple artillery regiments out of the equation, effectively silencing thousands of big guns in the backline. Now we just need to wrap up the big fight quickly to prevent further complications. We had since rerouted the whole tactical data streaming from the rebel headquarters and sent a constant stream of fake information to the rebels on-field army, masking loyalist movements to insert our entire army into strategic positions right under their noses. From the rebel army's point of view, their Auspex readout told them they were routing us and sending the governor's forces on a disarrayed retreat. We had deployed a complex mix of false readings and sacrificial dummy units to make the ploy look as convincing as possible. Hopefully the fog of war, combined with the endless supply of smoke in the actual battlefield could last long enough for the deception to work. I watched in my vision as the thousands of pieces moved slowly into position, pushing the Grand Rebel Army further and further into a tactically unsalvageable position. Suddenly there was a rapid stream of notifications indicating a surge of intercepted Vox messages coming from the Rebel Army. Mixed within reports of coordination and engagements were the personal messages from the Rebel Army. Not sure why, but a flurry of personalized Vox messages started appearing on the field. What is this? They had broken their Vox discipline. Apparently, it is a peculiar local custom known as Last Vox Right with some historical background. I had advised Governor Catalina against granting the privilege to her troops since it will give away our position. Cryptopher replied with a hint of disapproval. Curious, I dipped my consciousness into the stream to sample the contents, and a massive amount of information came passing through me. Here was a father telling his children to behave if he did not return. Their son was calling his parents not to worry about him because they were winning. Another confessed her love to a colleague and asked for a chance for dinner should he return. Like a slow summer phantom rain, the trickle of private Vox messages went through me. It drizzled slowly at first, then steadily it gained momentum. More and more messages came forth until it poured like a tropical storm. Again and again, similar messages and patterns kept repeating themselves. Parents and children worried about one another, friends wishing luck amongst peers, lovers calling out to each other. Hundreds of thousands of people were voxing out what could have been their messages if they never met one another again. The aftertaste of the data stream started flooding and formed an image of the combined soul of the army staring back at me. Their messages were so mundane, so ordinary. They are just ordinary people. I watched as a silent observer in a sea of well wishes and farewells. After a while it was getting hard to observe, so my consciousness was retracted from that data stream. When my vision returned to the godlike view of the battlefield, a few good old, regardless, notices had popped up on the edge of it. Breathing in deeply, my mind struggled to focus. Throne, damn it, I can do this. Then suddenly, an odd but familiar sensation hit me, one that should not have happened. Doubting myself, I swatted my forehead with the back of my palm to make sure, but there it was. On the back of my palm was a patch of moisture. It was sweat. I was sweating for the first time since coming to this world. Just as its implication was being pondered, a wave of dizziness and headaches hit me. I reflexively held onto the side of the podium, but then my body started to shake slightly before stabilizing back. Oh hi. Mortality, my old friend, long time no see. Lady SYRINE? Behind me came the concerned voice of my assigned caretakers, Verita and Wellmanor. I am all right, just feeling a bit tired, I assured them, but inwardly a sense of panic was setting in. So this hyper-advanced transhuman body has its limits after all.